Shalom and welcome to Stender Thoughts. Today I've been thinking about several news items which come up all the time, but this one with even greater ferocity. This was the item of the report of the Commission on Inquiry in Ireland to abuse within orphanages and schools run by the Christian Brothers. This is a 3,500-page, 5-volume report that talked about systematic sexual abuse of young women and of young men, orders run by the Christian Brothers. It's really not my business to deal with other religions. They have their own ways of dealing. In this case, evidently not very well, but now they're in the process of tshuva and looking at it. But I also know that this doesn't pertain, these problems don't pertain only to one religion, even though they may have their own special problems with it. But nonetheless, it doesn't pertain to one religion, and it's also certainly unfortunately and tragically within the Jewish people. When I first heard about clergy abuse when I was a young rabbi in Los Angeles, and I was on a talk program that talked about Catholic clergy abuse, I was stunned being on that talk show to hear from individuals calling up and saying, "Rabbi, you have it in your community." And my first reaction was to say, "No, that's impossible. No, we don't have that. We're not monastic. We don't have those problems of those who have given up sexuality as part of their declaration of faith. It can't happen within Judaism." And of course, I learned very fast and was involved in Los Angeles on defrocking, to use a Christian term, of defrocking several rabbis who had been involved in abuse. This is a difficult and hard situation to deal with. And the first thing is we need to own up to it, and own up to it that it doesn't belong to one particular faith and one particular religion. We have enough cases coming out, even very recently within Israel. The first thing to know, and for this, again, I rely upon the Talmud in Moed Katan, which is a discussion really mostly about holidays, and then a discussion about the whole situation of those who are mourners on holidays, and then goes to a sub-discussion of those who need to be put under the ban, kind of thrown out of the community. There's a whole discussion of individuals, and hidden within that discussion, and it's hidden because evidently people didn't really see it, is a discussion of a certain Surba means the Rabbanan, an older young student, means it's a young person in their prime, but they're already of somewhat senior status within being a youth, therefore probably someone in their 20s, who had Shmuot Rabot, there was many talk about him, and Shmuot Ra'ot, there were bad talk about him. If you look at Rashi and the Ritva, you see that they were of a sexual nature. The Ritva says that he was an individual who met at times with young unmarried women. And that's all it says. But from what we know, what we understand, the potential for abuse in that situation is terrific. And just from the very beginning, what we know from this is the following. The first is it's not clergy, or it's not priests, nor is it rabbis who abuse people. It's people who have that propensity to abuse, who enter the clergy, who enter the rabbinate, who enter teaching professions, who become a Catholic priest, or a nun, and all the rest, or a brother, who put themselves in those situations because that's where the young people are. And that's where fragile young people are. And those are people who need help, and who need guidance, and need succor, and they're able to abuse that situation. So that's number one. Number two, what we learn from the situation, of course, it's extraordinarily intensified by the fact that once one person becomes a clergy, in terms of what damage they can do. A clergy person is a person of authority, and they can use that authority, and what we were talking about is misusing authority. They're people of charisma, and they're in a charismatic situation in which they can influence people. The whole notion of teaching has a certain element of communication, relationship, and therefore a certain element of eroticism, which has to be fully guarded and fully protected in the teaching element when it's effective, and therefore can also be abused. So while its abusers or potential abusers become clergy, once they become clergy, how much worse it becomes. And then there's the ambivalence about what to do with them. And the first case there on page 17a, Yud Zayin Aleph, Amoy Katana talks about this individual who had a bad reputation. There was no smoking gun. And ambivalence. What do you do if they had a smoking gun? If they had proof, they could charge him. They could punish him. And they had another aspect that the Talmud says here. The Talmud says that they needed him. He was a great student. He was also a great young teacher. He had a lot to offer. That creates a certain type of ambivalence. And that's when institutions do themselves, and much worse, do young people and do the vulnerable a terrible, terrible, terrible disservice and actual violence, is when they become stymied. They don't know what to do with such individual. And they start thinking, maybe we'll send them somewhere else, or maybe we'll put them into a corner, or maybe we can fix such individual. In my case, a person like that can never go back to any sort of clergy or teaching positions. But in the Talmud, to their credit, they talk about their ambivalence. What can be done? Well, I'll just tell you at the beginning of this story that the great Rabbi Yochanan is quoted, and who himself quotes a verse from Malachi, from Malachi, and says the following. The verse says, Ki siftei kohen yishmeru dat, v'torah yivakshu mipihu, ki malach Hashem tzivakot hu. Because the words of a kohen, of a priest, or one who teaches, should preserve knowledge. You should request Torah from his very lips, somewhat erotic association. And the verse continues, because, or it can be understood only when, Malach Hashem Tzavakotu, he is indeed an angel of the Lord of hosts. And Rabbi Yochanan says, if he in all his manner of being is indeed angelic, and not just acting in a kind of fraudulent way as angelic, but truly is an angelic person, truly is a fine person, truly is a person who guards himself, truly is a person who may burn with a passion for God, but not for the passion for young people. If indeed he's that person, yivakshu Torah mipihu, you should actually go and get that type of Torah. But if not, he should be fully rejected. We need to learn in our religious communities that once this comes about, we should overcome our ambivalence, overcome any so-called mitigating circumstances, and immediately get rid of those from within our midst who are terribly abusing the sacred trust that they have, the trust of taking care of our children. These are sober Stender thoughts for today. I look forward to learning with you again soon. Shalom, shalom.